Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Under current law, members of Congress convicted of certain corruption offenses can forfeit their pensions, while other serious misconduct is treated differently. A bipartisan bill aims to close those gaps by including violent crimes and sexual misconduct involving staff. Supporters say the goal is accountability, not punishment by press release. Congressman Suhas Subramaniam, who co-sponsored the bill, joins me now. Congressman Subramaniam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
You and your colleagues in the House have recently introduced a bill, a bipartisan bill, the Congressional Pension Integrity Act. I'm going to wager that congressional pensions are not something the average American thinks about on a daily basis. So could I ask you to start, before we dig into the bill, giving us a quick description about how the process works?
Well, when you're in Congress for long enough, you are eligible for a pension when you retire. That amount depends on how long you serve in Congress. What I learned recently is that when you commit a crime or violate the rules in Congress and retire, you still get that pension. And with very few exceptions, that pension is not taken away from you, even if you commit a crime or break the rules. So the idea behind this bill was to make sure that the taxpayers don't have to subsidize a pension for someone who has broken the law or broken a serious rule during their time in office.
There are some provisions in the current statute that do allow for the removal of that provision. Bribery, treason, espionage, those are pretty clear. What gaps does your bill try to address specifically?
Right. We're adding sexual assault and serious violent crimes, things that should be, part of that list that are very serious crimes, but somehow haven't made their way onto it. And we're also adding sexual misconduct with a staffer who reports to you, which is a very clear violation of our rules. Very serious. I mean, you're putting a staffer in a very hard situation. And so, we thought this was common sense to add these, and that, in two recent examples where those offenses happened and the members decided to resign, if that had no bearing on whether they collect a pension. I think it should moving forward.
So would you say moving forward that the current provisions around requiring a criminal conviction to remove the pension would be added by misconduct charge? People could resign under the misconduct charge without a criminal conviction?
So even, let's say someone has served long enough to collect a pension, and then they commit a very serious crime and decide that they want to eschew the ethics committee, which I serve on, and simply retire. If they get convicted of that crime later on, then they're no longer eligible for a pension. And so this ensures that, one, they have due process. And so just being accused of a crime isn't enough to lose your pension. But when you're convicted of it, or when there's very clear evidence that you broke a serious rule, like having an affair with a staffer, for instance, then you will no longer be eligible for a pension. The idea is to make clear that we're in no way going to reward misconduct or very serious crimes committed during their time in office.
Do you see this reform primarily as about deterrence, changing behavior, or really more a public messaging about how Congress governs itself?
I see it as all of the above. Certainly, the best deterrence for anyone is hitting their pocketbooks. In Congress, we cannot put people in jail. We do not do that. We, make the laws, but the worst punishment someone can receive as a member of Congress from the ethics committee where I serve is being expelled from Congress. We can do no more than that. This is taking it one step further. I do think by passing laws like this, we show the American public that we are serious about policing ourselves, and that this is not about trying to protect each other and trying to look out for each other in Congress. This is about looking out for the American people and their tax dollars and making sure that members of Congress are held to a high standard.
Congressman Suhas Subramaniam represents Virginia's 10th congressional district. So you've framed this as a matter of accountability. The FERS retirement system that average federal workers use is the same that members of Congress pay into and that this pension would be paid out of. From your perspective, should congressional retirement benefits line up with the expectations that lawmakers place on the rest of the federal workforce?
I think members of Congress should be held to a higher standard than the average citizen. We are elected by the people, and they put their trust in us and their taxpayer dollars behind us. And we're a reflection of their communities and are supposed to uphold the values of those communities when we come to Congress. And when we come here, we disagree on a lot of issues because of that. But we're supposed to set an example. And that idea of setting an example for the American people is bipartisan. I don't think anyone disagrees here in the body. But if we're continuing to see misconduct and very serious crimes being committed by members while in office, it reflects on all members, and it certainly reflects on their communities, and it is an embarrassment to their communities and to the American people. So that's why we want to hold members of Congress to a higher standard.
And is it the rash of recent headlines that prompted you and your colleagues to introduce this bill today or now?
That was certainly part of it. I certainly learned recently about this pension system and what is and isn't disqualifying. And as a member of the Ethics Committee, I always wondered, why are people resigning before they face judgment from the Ethics Committee? And while that has nothing to do with the pension, it certainly has something to do with the idea that they don't want to face consequences or see more evidence come out about other wrongdoing that may have happened. So they want us to stop the investigation. And one way to do that is to resign, because we can no longer investigate them once they resign.
So what is the next step for your bill?
So there's two options. One, we can push it through committee, which is the easier option. I don't think this should be controversial, but sometimes committees tend to sit on bills. They don't want to move bills forward. So, that's one idea. It's important to note that this bill in particular would not apply to this Congress. It would only apply starting in the next Congress, because we're not allowed to change the rules governing things like our pension for our Congress. And so it would apply to the next Congress. So we have some time between now and December to try to pass this bill. If the committee sits on it and doesn't want to act on it, the speaker doesn't want to act on it, another thing we can do is try to bring it to the floor through a discharge petition or some other mechanism. And given that we have several Republicans who support the bill already, and we have almost all, if not all, Democrats who I think would be supportive, we could get this to the floor if the committees and the speaker do not want it on the floor. I think if you put it to a vote in Congress right now, you wouldn't see many people vote against it.
And do you believe that you'd get a similar level of support on the Senate side?
We are in discussions with some senators on introducing a companion bill, either to this or maybe a bigger bill that encompasses this. And so we believe that there is support already in the Senate, and we hope that the Senate will introduce either similar or the same legislation. But right now, those talks are happening.
Are there other ethics areas that you and the Oversight Committee are considering exploring?
Well, I sit on the Oversight Committee and the Ethics Committee, which are separate. And the Ethics Committee in particular has been criticized in recent months for being slow. And it's funny because this has actually been the most efficient Ethics Committee in modern congressional history. We've closed out several matters that have been pending since before COVID. COVID really set the Ethics Committee back. We've closed many matters that were outstanding for a long time, and we have moved very fast on a record number of investigations that we have this year. The Ethics Committee used to be, at one point in Congress, simply a place where complaints went to die, and we're trying to change that perception now and take every complaint seriously and investigate it thoroughly. We do still want due process for all complaints and all members, and sometimes that means we do not move as fast as the news cycle, but we move faster than a court of law. I've worked with my colleagues to develop a few tactics to help get things moving quickly, and we have a set of reforms that I've explored and I've talked to my colleagues about that we hope to enact if not this Congress, then the next Congress.
Congressman Suhas Subramaniam represents Virginia's 10th Congressional District. Sir, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.